Hello. I'd like to introduce my friend David. I met him just a little while ago, maybe like 50 years ago, and we hit it off real nicely. We'd met 50 years ago. No, I think it was like maybe a few months ago. Seems like 50. But we met some time ago, but I'd seen him in a local coffee shop, and I was like, dude, I need to talk to this guy. So it's really cool how fate or providence or whatever brings people together, and it's a meaningful thing. Wellness coach, very spiritual guy. I really enjoy his contribution to the world. And there's even more that I'm learning about him. And hopefully on the show today, we will uncover more about David. Man, thank you for coming to the show. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Zine. I really appreciate, first of all, we want to appreciate this opportunity. I think this podcast is a great art and a great expensive time because, a lot of times we underestimate the value of just inquiring on what people's minds are, where their thoughts are, where they are.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, this is the foundation of civilization, especially in times that we go through, from things that we want our kids to see or get passed down on that they can go back and reflect on. And I just think that podcasts are a great way of listening and gaining in information and seeing where people are at.
Yeah, totally. One of the podcasts that I'd been listening to during this pandemic, was actually the Joe Rogan. And from listening, I got my inspiration to do one of mine because it's a similar setting. Of course, I've got, Meet the Mime thing. Oh, speaking of which, by the way, this is this show. I named it Meet the Mimes because I think that everyone has a mime that, just like the introduction said, that they're acting out, whether it's their beliefs, their goals, their dreams. So I'm curious, what's your mime? Right.
To be honest,
No pressure.
It is a complex question, but it's not complex in the sense where it takes forever to explain per se.
Right.
Like Albert Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you really don't understand it.
Ooh, smack in the face.
So I think we've talked about that before. But it's a matter of its essence.
Okay.
Because of its not its complexity not being described in a sense of the excess of words, but more like a complexity in sense of its depth, where you can always pull from it. You can always get meat from it. You can always search more. Where its walls and its barriers can always be broken.
Okay.
It can always be examined. It always can be tested. I prefer that in the context of this, like my mime, to fall into that realm, where people don't feel limited in it.
Okay.
Because it's supposed to be a space, but a particular space. Like our homes are spaces, our workplaces are spaces, and we fulfill even the sense of our mimes in those particular spaces. We become entities and identities in those spaces. When you're out with your friend at a restaurant, I don't think you're portraying the same you that you are when you're behind a desk at customer service.
Okay, yeah, totally.
But there's still with the regulations surrounding you in that space, you're still you, but it comes through a lens because of the space that which you're in. Same thing with like the difference between a light that is shown through a flashlight versus a light that's shown by the sun versus the light that's shown by your overhead light in the room. The light is being perceived as the same, but the light is still light, still a refraction. It's kind of that sense where my mime is to make that space for people to be perceived and to project in the way that's best facilitating to who they are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
It's inclusive.
So, like, your mime isn't a specific thing, but it's just who you are. Yeah. Okay. That was really deep, so I'm still processing. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. How about that angle? Maybe I should just shut up. Let him tell his mime. All right. But that was deep, man. I mean, I've always enjoyed the conversations that we have because most of them fly over my head, but thankfully I have that parachute that catches it, right? While I'm, I'm trying to just, keep up with you, and that parachute's, holding me back. But I really enjoy the conversations that we have because it's like, I mean, I remember the last one we had. We were we went out and got a drink, and we were talking about something. I can't remember what we were talking about, but I just remember getting smacked in the face with everything you were saying. I was like, man, jeez, this hurts. This hurts. Why is he? What? It's so good. So good. He's killing me right now. But it was stuff I needed to hear, and I know that you weren't probably intending to do that, but it was just like you were just expressing what you saw, and I was just like, man, that's great. And I think one of the things was because I was telling you about the fact that during the COVID season that I had found that COVID had given an opportunity for me to be able to realize or to be sat still, isolated because everyone had been pulling into their groups, to be able to realize that I was, I have issues with commitment and relationship issues. So, but some of the things that you were saying, as an explanation of maybe some of the foundations of, this mess I've gradually brought myself to with the choices I made, what some of the foundations might be, and maybe even some insight into why and where I might be going with it if I don't pay attention. So, really great talks. I really appreciate that about you. Really, really do. The insight and those sharp knives that you wield with your words. They cut deep. But in a good way. So
surgery without the anesthesia.
Oh, man. All right.
I kid.
No. He knows how powerful he is.
Oh my gosh, I'm tearing up.
So man, what you into these days? I mean,
to be honest, and this is another one of those things, like, let me say it like this. Hopefully they'll help like bring it down. I enjoy, like, people say, when do you ever come down? Like, when do you ever? And it's like, I enjoy the realm of transcendental. It's home for me.
Like the transcendental meditation
mindset in general.
Wow.
Transcendentalism is something that goes beyond just meditation. It can be a way of life. A lot of people, like, when you think of things, principles that people try to take within themselves to cope with life.
Okay.
And I want to emphasize on the word coping, or in terms of adaptation. They take things like Lao Tzu, Sun Tzu, Confucius, Buddhism, things that are or Stoicism, or ancient Greek philosophers everywhere from Plato, Socrates, to try to cope with their perspective on life and what's happening to them. But a lot of times I see it as a coping mechanism, but not a state of being, because it'll be a response to something that is very harsh or traumatic to life.
Wow.
Like how we deal with death, how we deal with the loss of a loved one, how we deal with breakups, things to keep us in a sense of psyche to where we don't lose ourselves, because, what's the common phrase we always hear people say? It is what it is, man.
Yep. Dismissive. Yeah.
Dismissive, but it doesn't really come off to me as something that is dismissive per se, as much as it is trying to make sense of things because we're so caught up into the normality of the world that when something sudden like that happens, we got to pull from something. It's like, oh, why? You know, people are beings of that question. Why? You know, wanting to find purpose and understanding of what is going on around them. You know, being able to pull things that are applicable to the truths that they already stand upon. You know? And ultimately makes us very human because we build. So we do. We build and destroy and build again.
Wow.
Just same with a lot of other things that we see around us. Our bodies do the same thing in terms on a cellular level.
Yeah.
Or ants, you know. I love comparisons to ants because like that's all they do. They build and expand and they build and expand. Then the elements, things that are out of the ants' control. Break down their foundation just so that they can do it again without question.
Interesting.
Without hesitation.
Oh,
these are intelligent beings now. You know.
Wow.
And when you're that communal and that integrated within your little micro society going on that no one else is like really paying attention to unless they got one of those like glass ant things in their room. They're like, wow, look at that. You know, it's just going off. It's just, you just see them, and their form of communication is, to me, is going back to that word, very transcendental. You know, and so I go back to that to say that for me, that is why I dwell in it, because it's such truth. You know, the being so transcendental that it constantly puts in you a state of a question. The question always the question redeems the cycle. When you ask a question, like for example, using mathematics, there has to be a question, or the act of doing math does not exist. You don't start a math question with the solution. You do, but there has to be variables. There has to be absence for there to be presence. You know, there has to be chaos in order to be order. There has to be darkness in order for there to be light. There's things that are, they're just transcendental in nature. You know, you show up to math class and it's like, all right, X equals 3. On what basis? Oh, I just asked a question. Now we're at where we're at. And that's where we want to be.
Wow.
You know, and that's how I'm always there because I enjoy it. As the mathematician loves the math, so I, as you know, David, who I am, and all the reflections or the lenses take place, I love the question. I love the transcendentalism. I love the space that takes me beyond what I can see and what is visual around me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It makes sense. I'm really getting it. Man, I'm sorry. I'm not. I was just like, no, but I like, when I was thinking, as you were speaking and listening, of course, I like the idea. I think I kind of got stuck here. That's why, because I keep thinking about that. What you had said, that the ants, they build, right, and expand, and build, expand, until things out of their control changes their trajectory, and so that they can, but this was the thing, so that they can do it again. And it was kind of going back to what you're saying, doing this. And you didn't say enjoy, but anyway, that's what resonated with me with the ants. That they could do it again, and without question. That's what you had said.
Yes, without question.
And I was just thinking to myself, in terms of course, Christianity. You always do things like do everything to the glory of God, or with all your strength, all your might. And it kind of like paired, like there was a connection there to me from that, because my background, of course, is Christianity, and I've been exploring, by speaking with other people like yourself about other angles of spirituality, other hues, if you will, and I always do a comparison from where I, came from and draw from that, and then I compare it and I see how those things might be in agreement or disagreement. And I just thought that was very interesting because I know that even in the Bible there are examples of go to the ant, you sluggard, and be wise. Consider her ways. Yeah. And I'm just like, man, that's interesting, really interesting. So it made those connections for me. So on those, I think I was, like I said, a little distracted by what you said, and I was just kind of thinking over that. And then whatever you were building on top of that, I'm still kind of processing. But that's very interesting. It's very interesting. What did I'd mentioned that Christianity is the basis for me. What was the basis for you, starting you on your path in life?
If I could start off by saying, in a sense of just spirituality in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
Foundation for religion, foundation for philosophy, foundation for nationalism, because some beliefs are just based off of like, hey, you're the same nation, same race, same,
Yeah.
that you're just one of us just by birth, like Judaism, for example, in its origins. It's just like, your mom. So, hey, you with us. So, I mean, yeah, and like just some people's namesake for just how it is, just based off of the perspective of those who have been entrusted with the belief system. And then to continue on a level of secession, whether that's secession by monarchy, like, British throne type system, or priesthood, or like in some Eastern traditions, or for Catholicism with the popes.
Yeah.
Some form of or some form of entrustment to say you got to maintain these principles to keep the system going. For me, that all goes back to my roots, and that's a lot of times what my spirituality took me to, was going backwards, going to the past in order to know where I was going.
Interesting.
So it would go further and further and further back, going back, continuously digging up. And I felt very reaffirmed in it because it was always like faithful in a sense, where there was always something. It's interesting how you'll go back to what was once was.
Yeah.
And it was always new instead of old.
Yeah.
It was where the correlation was taking place. It was like, I'm looking up old stuff, but it's so new. It's so beautiful in a sense. Just fascination. And it would lead me to what I would consider divine encounters, which in that perspective is just anything that creates a very dramatic change in one's anything.
Yeah.
Wow. One's nature, one's thought process, one's perspective of self, one's relationships. Those things are even down to like when you meet that new lady, and you're like, man, she's, like divine encounter because of how that impacts you and how that impacts you on a chemistry level. People underestimate that.
Wow.
These things impact you and really rearrange your whole like chemical compound.
Wow.
Down to, releases of dopamine and oxytocin.
That makes sense. Yeah.
To that terrible, terrible detachment feeling that goes afterwards when things don't work out and you're like, all right, this is transformation time. Because what do us guys do? We're like, oh man, we gotta get our stuff together.
Oh yeah.
But that's just in nature, atoms do that.
Wow.
They break electrons apart, put them back together,
Mm-hmm.
And we're just that glob of neurons and protons going around trying to make sense of things. We start just, we have these vortexes of energies around us and we're just like, all right, someone pulled from my energy, so I got to pull from somewhere else. And then what happens when that happens? Then the atomic number of that chemical compound changes. The water becomes vapor, or and we change those things. Wow. But what does it all lead to? Cycles.
Wow.
So why am I getting all, integrated into those little things? Because they're reflections of ourselves. That's a part of my perspective of my mime, is that do not separate life from life. Life is not only you, but life is all around you and life is in you. So why do not you not use these same principles to understand what's happening to you?
Interesting.
So that you can get a better perspective of what's going on and why that you as a living being or in existence, as a multi-organism, going through the same transformations that everything else is going on around you. Wow. And that the true feeling of pain that you feel from these experiences is not because it's bad for you, but because we are programmed, we are trained, we are instilled to think, to fear change. We want to hold on. It's like, man, don't rock this boat, man. I just got it. But I'm like, look at the ant. He's about to have his rock boat tomorrow when it rains.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. What kind of a mindset? What does that look like in a human being? Are there any examples of human beings that would be comparable to that ant when they build their empire and the rain comes or somebody comes along and kicks it, what they built? Do you have any real life examples of individuals who have that mindset or have been, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Historically speaking, any civilization of nomads. And typically they're the most spiritual, like shepherds.
Interesting. I was not ready for that. Okay. Please explain.
Yes. No, I kid. The idea where they understand the concepts of transition because their trade or what they do facilitates that. To where that's why they're minimalists.
Okay.
Because they're always expectant of change. They're like, I'm just going to carry this one little bag I got and some grain and I got my sheep with me. We're just walking around, just going, anticipating that I have to go on to the next thing. This is why I really respect and honor tradesmen, because that's their lifestyle. At one point you could be working at a job and be rooted there and not be willing to travel, but it limits you.
Yeah.
It limits you to the entity in which you work for in that particular location, to where when you are literally forced to do it, but you do it in a way that it hurts you for a moment. You lose your job. What do? Start feeling your whole job becomes your application process, looking for another one based off of something that was out of your control, or when you lost control. It could have been either one.
Wow.
But a person who lives in a trade, a welder, carpenter, whatever spectrum you want to be on, you could be in one space, you could be another space. And knowing that is your lifestyle. And that you're only there for a temporary time to fulfill a particular duty. A construction worker, move. It's a constant shift and being ready to shift. It's just a lifestyle. But that's that's something that is old telling, like old time telling, like something that has just been throughout time. It doesn't even necessarily have to apply to today's world. You can look back in the day and see that is what takes place now, in terms of like when civilizations change and people move. Now, you mentioned Christianity. A big theme in Christianity is this nomadicism.
Okay.
Where
okay, I think I know what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, for example, the Jewish diaspora. Rome comes through in 70 AD and wrecks your capital, wrecks your everything, brings about change. Like in the term you said, kicks it down.
Yeah.
And everybody flees. But the ones that stay, it's not a good result.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not, it's something, and it's a continual shift of expansion. Empires are being built. People are wanting to change their allegiances to adapt to the change.
Allegiances, can you explain that a little bit more? Change their allegiances to adapt to the change. What? There's something there. I don't know what it is, but what is that saying?
It's the idea of, for example, when you see the shift taking place, the trend that's taking place. We even see it in our, in our social media world.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're staying back in the day, let's use Alexander the Great, for example. Or we could talk about somebody I researched this morning, Mansa Musa, who was an old first millennium king in Africa, expanding Islam, or Alexander the Great just expanding his empire amongst 4 different civilizations. You're under his jurisdiction and you adapt to his precepts and his concepts that he puts out, but you're still able to maintain your identity. You're still able to maintain who you are. You're still able to say, I'm this, I'm that, but I keep to this regulation because of this person's overtake.
Wow.
Persia, Rome, Greece, Egypt, Assyria, the Mongols.
Wow.
It just goes on and on and on. And you just kind of have to be like, they raise the sword and they're like, you got a lot of stuff over here.
So what I was curious about, there's nothing necessarily bad about changing allegiances to assimilate to change. You were just saying that this is a means to survive.
Yes, it's an instinctive means to survive, the sense of security. However, this is where I come back to the beauty of transcendentalism, where what I'm talking about is not the same. Transcendentalism will allow change to take place and an overtake to take place. So that when humanity in response accepts it, it's instinctive. It's that what some Eastern philosophers would say, the lower chakras of yourself respond. Your fight or flight response. The whoa, what do I say to this? Do I fight against it or do I run? But the transcendentalism brings about something that I find to be a little bit more beautiful. Where once the change has taken place and it's taken real establishment over the majority of the population.
Okay.
Then within the population, I'm not talking about anything that is external because there is no more external. The world that you would have known of in that day, whether it's today or 1,000 years ago, that has completely been contained and has been built upon by this principle that is like a wave that's taken over. This is done by something that is systemic, like Roman Empire type deal. Let's just talk about Rome for a second. And they do the whole thing. Now, there's only one more room for space for change. If this change doesn't take place, then whatever has been built maintains. Right? This is the part where the ants have completely built this hill.
Okay.
This particular hill. And now this is where something elemental, something that comes down to the minutia. It is the human heart.
Wow.
That gets exposed to information and knowledge over time out of pure desire. You cannot hold that. You can't stop it. People are always going to be in a particular time where they're going to desire more. They're going to desire more, but the more that they wish is a change. So then the population within starts to change and starts to shift and starts to gain information and knowledge and then starts to rebel. Not rebel necessarily against the people per se, but their state of living, their state of being, their state of existence.
Okay.
This is like, no, this isn't, there's more to this. You're withholding back from us in order to maintain what you got going on. So like, that's how Rome fell. Rome fell from within.
Interesting.
Because,
So it wasn't like the invading armies of who was it that crushed Rome? Well, there wasn't one. I don't. Let me think, because I'm thinking in biblical terms, or because like remember the idol that Daniel dreamed.
Right.
First was Babylon, Medo-Persia,
Greece,
then Rome, and then like of course the feet. So in those terms, since there wasn't any, because well, that makes sense because I mean, because Rome was the iron, legs of iron, because they were known for their
raw strength.
Yeah, and then the feet were made out of iron, which were pieces of Rome,
Right.
and then the clay, and they never would
mesh
together.
exactly.
Interesting.
And that's the idea. That's a huge principle you have to recognize, even on an agricultural or an inventive mindset, is that people know that if iron is mixed with clay, it's actually weak. It's very weak and very unsturdy, and it will break. You know, it is the opposite of what lime does with mortar, you know, with some a substance that's within that holds it together, you know, or if you use the wrong type of threading on a cloak, you know, that it does a wear and tear on the fabric rather than holding it together.
Interesting.
You know, it's like a lot of times why, you know, Israelites walking through a desert can't sew different threadings together. Like, there's a commandment that says so we can't wear. It's like if you're walking millions of miles wearing the same garment, it better be made out of pure cotton, or it's gonna you're gonna be looking dank. You know what I'm saying?
So the breakdown from within, from Rome. So that's what we were looking at in comparison to that image. So that's what you were talking about, and that's why Rome fell. Okay.
A lot of times that's any kind of imperial fall is this dissatisfaction of the citizenship.
Sounds like a lot like where we are right now. I know you're waiting for me to say that.
I was just sitting here.
He really is slow. It's like, well, I didn't want to mention it.
I wasn't even going to go there. I was like, no, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts. I mean, okay, that's interesting. That's really interesting. I think about the last big power, I guess, before America, of course, was England. So did England experience anything like this? Because I know there was a big, what do you call it, a procession out of England, for us, for the Puritans, I guess, supposedly religious liberty and things like that. So was there like social unrest or, something going on where there was a breakdown that led to the exodus out of England and the founding of America?
There's a lot of, let me just hold it here, that is just, I know there's a lot of debate on who first discovered the Americas. Mm-hmm. But in terms with what we know or what we like to apply to, with the whole French-British War, the Britons, not wanting, their citizens to come here and build a whole new colonialization and civilization of what they're doing. One detail that I would like that would make this particular migration very important is that it involved the highest form of economy at the time, just slavery.
Okay.
Because of labor, that's how or at least looking from a historical perspective, I'm not even talking about ethics here of whether, what was going on, because we're talking about cycles here. We're talking about things that we observe that humanity does over and over again. It's requiring large populations for labor in order to establish new things.
Oh yeah.
So we know that Rome has the same history. We know that Greece had the same history. Oh, yeah. We know that it's the imprint of empires.
All the way to Egypt, yeah.
Yeah, it's the imprint.
Yeah.
It's an imprint. It's like, you want to know how an empire is about to start? That's that thing.
That's it.
So
yeah.
And having to go and collect people for labor because you haven't fully done your expansion, because it's different from trade. Trade is when civilizations are established and there's a means of exchange of resources, you know, and people from civilizations are expanding, sending some resources here. You're getting a barter system to where you can get a return for it, things like that. But for an imperial establishment, no, you're looking for bodies.
Looking for bodies.
We're looking for bodies here. So
that makes sense. Yeah. I was going to say something that just kind of slipped my mind, but I think that's interesting because it's like I remember thinking about like Egypt and how, you know, they built all of those different things, you know, but then I don't know. My knowledge is limited because I mean I've been doing a little research on the pyramids and they're saying that it had been built by the biblical figure Enoch, the Great Pyramid, apparently, who apparently was abducted by aliens. No, I'm kidding. But it says that God took him, which is an interesting thing, right? I said both of those intentionally, but I saw that. It's synonymous with. That is an interesting thought, but I mean, like I said, I don't know. But you know, the biblical history, an account of, you know, Israel being used as slaves to build their empire. And then kind of shooting off of that, in the timeline that we have, of course, Egypt was before, I guess, concerning the history of the Hebrews. The image that Daniel saw, or even Nebuchadnezzar saw too. Nebuchadnezzar saw and Daniel interpreted it for him. Where does Egypt fall in that? And I was curious, why wasn't that included? Because Egypt is one of the oldest, right? There's some before Mesopotamian cultures,
right?
So I mean, like. Do you know any of the reasons why Egypt wasn't considered in that image, or Mesopotamia, or?
I have some implications.
Okay.
First of all, we have to talk about what we're dealing with first. Like Egypt and Israelite slavery based off of like biblical text. We first have to establish that Hebrews were not the only ones there.
Right.
We're talking about a community here.
Okay.
There were several, just like in Nebuchadnezzar's day, there were several civilizations and several different people within the empire. But when you're talking about the building of Egypt, we also have to talk about their origins and the origins in a sense of years and thousands of years of family building. You know, any imperial rule, it's probably got family lineage involved in it.
Oh.
So from a Hebrew perspective, the word for Egypt, it's Mitzrayim.
Okay.
And Mitzar is an actual individual that if you look in Genesis is one of the children of Ham. So now we're talking about things that are going back to the days of Noah, you know, and the destroying and building of civilizations all over again, right? So you have Shemitic, Hamitic, and Japhetic. You know, a lot of people associate that with, you know, and it goes down to where like we'll end up talking forever on this, on people's speculations. But let's just go with the fact that Hamitic was a southern diaspora.
Okay.
Shemitic being eastern, and Japhetic being northern. So when you go up to the north, dealing with like European civilizations, Caucasus civilizations, then you're dealing with Arabic civilizations with Shemitic, and possibly even going beyond that, you know.
Wow.
Then you have southern Hamitic, which is, you know, would go into Africa, you know, with Egypt being kind of the beginning of that Saharan establishment. But
okay.
I will say this, empire building a lot of times mixes things up.
Huh. How do you mean?
For example, if you're thinking about everything that went on with Constantine, the Ottomans, and all the migrations and the mixtures of Ptolemy is a big one. because that is a whole mix of Egyptian, Arabic, Mesopotamian, and Grecian lineages all in one. Yeah, and so you have a whole thing going on.
Man.
Right, to where they literally have down the line created a whole nother humanity that goes on there, where people can pull lines from everywhere. And you kind of just, your best bet is to kind of rely on them to kind of tell you, because you look at their names, you look at people's in their history, from their lineage, and the people who are able to maintain family trees and kind of trace back where they came from. So now we're talking about something that I really enjoy discussing, is like how people can choose their genetic sourcing.
Wow.
Be like, what part of you do you want to be? What part of you is resembled in your behavior the most? What do you really attach yourself to? Or do you completely disassociate and want to start all over again? This is the beauty of genetics. It's moldable. It's moldable by the decisions that we make. We learn our roots and then we recreate them, or we dismantle them entirely and start from a whole new thing, which a lot of people have done, like especially for like Islamic expansion.
Wow.
To where they don't pay attention to those ancient root systems from Hittites and Jebusites and Moabites and Aramites and people from Tyre and Sidon. It goes on. I'm telling you, it goes on and on. You can go really far back. Ptolemaic lineages. There's the Persian lineages. You can pull and pull and pull. Some people maintained it. Some people fought to maintain something that they would like to call as pure. But I hate to break it to you.
Wow.
Pure bloodlines is a thing of the past.
Wow.
It's something to where we kind of build a new type of civilization based off of what we're doing today. But again, that's the beauty of the ant.
Wow.
The elements, which we'll call them empires, people who desire for control and power, will facilitate an environment for people to behave a certain way and decide for themselves what is casted away and what is kept, what is preserved, and what a lot of people would call abominable.
So I don't know, with you explaining this and really putting in perspective the like timeline of
my phone.
Oh, you can go off screen.
Go.
Yeah,
Okay.
Totally. Yeah, just to keep it going. But yeah, like one of the things that I was thinking as you were explaining all this was like, there's a lot of time that you're expressing. There's a lot of time.
There's a lot of time.
And I was just thinking to myself, we're all human beings, right? And as time progresses and moves on, we evolve, for lack of a better word. In some eras, there's talk of, even though the Bible talks about it, where the entities that aren't from here,
right,
extraterrestrials, called Nephilim, right? Yeah, are with human people and have offspring, and they're huge, they're giants. And there's one of them that was a descendant, was Goliath, supposedly. Right. A descendant of that Nephilim and human. So this is real stuff.
I mean, not to mention all, just to throw this real penny in, not to mention all the archaeological findings of these ridiculous sized bones.
Yes. But out of all this time, what I was getting at was, do you think, does all of that just clump up as time goes on? Clumping up to where, is any of that because I think about like one of the things in the Bible it talks about in the commandments, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children. It's in the 10 Commandments. I think the fourth commandment talks about this, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children, third, fourth generation that hate me. Yeah. So with that mindset,
right,
out of all this time, talking about culture, talking about ideas, talking about religion, religious systems. When we come to this day, do you think any of that plays into how chaotic things might be? Because we always talk about like 60 years ago, things were simpler, blah, 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 blah. But do you think these things are manifested that are just maybe dormant in us, that because of how things are now with technology, social media, the encouragement for instant gratification, all these different things, is it finally just kind of coming to the surface? And I think about in terms of like when we used to make tofu when we were kids, right? You boil that raw, soy milk, and what comes to the surface, that's what you eat. It's skimmed off. And I'm just thinking, while you were explaining that, is that one of the reasons why things are just kind of nuts? Or I don't know, I'm just kind of shooting out. But that was just like a mental image. Like all of this time, it just kind of comes and just, and everything's just added more and more to the human experience and human essence of humanity. That is it kind of coming to a head? Is it coming to something? This all play towards something. I don't know how to exactly say it. Maybe I've already said it, but what do you think about that? I mean, I don't know if you've considered that, but
I think it would be fair to say this, and this is going to sound crazy coming out of my mouth.
Okay.
Because of the kind of person that I am. I actually appreciate the amount of effort, time, and desperation that the higher elites take to withhold information from society.
No, they don't. That's not true. It just got lost. Remember in Andrea, that place in Andrea or wherever, that place that had all that stuff, it just burned. Nobody knows.
Exactly.
I'm kidding.
But no, seriously, because that's what happens to literature over time. It gets burned. It gets removed. Yeah.
Alexandria, yeah.
These kind of things take place. Temples are burned down, destroyed. Things are eliminated.
Okay.
That are documentations of people's experiences.
You said eliminated. So that's intentional, you're saying?
Of course. And it's not in the sense of from a human consciousness, but in terms of like what we're talking about with their cycles.
Okay.
Because the cycles happen as the nations, and this is a biblical concept too, the rise and fall of nations is in the hand of God, Elohim. Yeah, however you want to go. And when you look at that, that means everything else follows. Why is there so much emphasis all the way from Genesis to Revelation about remembrance? Because humanity, through these cycles, goes through a cycle of forgetfulness to where there's an elimination of the natural things that we're already inclined to, things that are already us. It's not the fact that people are separated or disconnected in a sense where it's like these mysteries, this 90% of the bodies of water that we don't know, the 90% of the cosmos we haven't explored. It's all you. But your ignorance is also part of the cycle.
Oh my goodness.
Because of the fact that the forgetfulness makes the remembrance a sense of relief, the pain, and then the medicinal being the sense of relief that you feel that is so pleasant to know. However, there is a concept that a lot of us are so against because of the culture of instant gratification. And is that we don't like things to be unfolding. Life in of itself and our experiences and everything that we go through are pages.
Okay.
Why are you picking up that book and reading the last chapter just because you want to know how the story ends? You are not going to enjoy that book.
No, there's so much context you've missed.
There's so much context you missed to where the punchline is.
Yeah, it
sucks. Yeah. For lack of a better term, it's just terrible.
Wow.
Because it's about the story and it's about the appreciation. Even again, talking about the 10 Commandments. I would like to emphasize that the 10 Commandments, both in Exodus and in Deuteronomy, you can tell that the God of Abraham and the God of Moses are both like, or himself in both contexts he is saying, these 10 words are not going to hit you until I tell you, until you go through that experience where you remember what I did back in Egypt. Yeah. He repeats it over and over and over and over and over again. He's like, remember what I did. You had you have a commandment in there that says you have 7 festivals to follow. The first one being one of the high holy days, and this is a Passover. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what kind of importance do you have on Passover if you don't know what it was about? You're like, all right, we're gonna get some lamb, we're gonna get some bread, some wine. We're just gonna chill and have a good time. It's like, no,
we'll watch the game after.
And watch the game afterwards. It's like this. You see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
There's a whole event. Even the word me'id, if I'm pronouncing it right for modern Hebrews, and I'm sorry if I'm not, but but it's the word for witness.
Okay.
Or testimony. It is the thing that was another commandment about to keep the testimonies as a requirement. Wow. You have laws. You have more than just laws now. You have laws, you have commandments, you have statutes, you have precepts, you have ordinances, like way you judge certain situations. For the gray areas, right?
Yeah.
Of certain circumstances. Then you have testimonies. You have these things that are put into place for you to be reflective of what Paul or Peter would say, the spirit of the law. The emphasis that like a lot of times like Christians would use to, facilitate their actions is that it's like, it's not about the works, it's about the faith, but the faith produces the work.
Right.
But it's a heart issue, right? Mm-hmm. But it's like heart issues in what? It's just your love for God or something? It's like, no, it's the understanding of what was once, like how you were just dead in sin and then you were free, right? Mm-hmm. But in this context of Hebraic culture and Hebraic history, you can't value something if you don't know what the pain was like being in the previous state.
Truly.
You can't. You don't have an appreciation of light without the darkness.
Wow.
And not darkness in a sense of like, oh man, I was lost. No, the fact that you were ignorant and in a state of complete chaos to where like what we're kind of experiencing today with existential crisis and not knowing what's going on. That's a state of chaos. Chaos is relative to darkness. Egyptians called it the primordial existence.
Interesting.
Where everything's just, it's not the fact that it was darkness being an absence, but it was the abundance of everything and there was no distinction.
Wow.
Technically, right now, we are in day 1 of Genesis because this is a state of chaos. And then from the chaos, just like how even scientists will talk about how things came to be where like there was water, right? Mm-hmm. And the spirit was hovering over the waters and water being a reflective of chaos from a Hebraic perspective. And that being because of their geographical location, because when they looked to the west was the Mediterranean Sea. It was just vast and unknown and chaotic and storms and craziness going on. And we don't ever go far out there because, we don't know what's going on.
Land right there,
no man's existence out there.
Man.
And then from the water came land, came existence, it came order, came establishment. And how we have to perceive land as a means of a place that we can foundationally stand upon. To feel secure, like, okay, I'm in a spot now. Okay, I know where I'm at. Okay, I can be above. I got my head above water now. Yeah. And then being able to build upon that, and then life springs from that piece of land, right? And we go from day 1 to day 7. But the reason being is that why I say that is because you haven't reached the day of rest yet. Wow. This is time for the ant to build.
Build.
Build, and start that cycle all over again where. Just how we experienced during COVID, we had to sit down and participate in self-inquiry. We had to sit here and make lists of like, who am I? Why am I here? Yeah. I'm no longer occupied by my 9-to-5 job that defined my existence for me. Now I got to figure out what I'm doing here. Oh no, my children, I can't allow the education system to teach them everything I want to know. Now I got to do it. Oh, I can't, there are all these things that you deal with your wellness and your existence and, your perception of self that are now your responsibility and no longer the responsibility of the system to where the system can do nothing but just, sit there and try to comfort you and send you stimulus checks while everyone is going tribal.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Definitely.
and not tribal in the sense of like, oh no, be scared of like your neighbor, but tribal in the sense of like association, who you associate with based off of your common goals. But you don't know that until you did the self-inquiry. Then you find someone else who did a self-inquiry and say, your self-inquiry is very similar to mine.
Yeah, I mean, because that's what I experienced when I saw you there in the cafe. I was just like, oh, no, this guy. I have a friend down that is she's a nomad, and she's actually living right now down in Mexico. She's American, American girl, but we had met in Austin, Texas. I went there for a music conference, and it was really cool. But anyway, along the path of time there, since last year, August last year till now, August 2018, 19, I don't remember. Anyway, it's been longer than a year. But I gotten to know her, and she was mentioning something on her Instagram, and she was like, the age of Aquarius is coming, and I think there was a day or so ago, and there was going to be at the same time, depending on where you are, you can go online and look, depending on your geographical location, what time you need to meditate, and then like go into this new age with this energy and through meditation and things. I was just thinking to myself, before now, I didn't really travel in those circles of spiritualists and nomadic-minded people. But I had two questions. Well, I had a question. What do you think about that age of Aquarius and what I was explaining about that? But then I also wanted to make a note and comment about what you had said about the nomadic mentality of an individual who is like a tradesman.
Right.
I have my business that's carpentry, drywall, tile, do a lot of that stuff. So, which pays for all this and for me to be able to do music. And
that's awesome.
because I know,
that's awesome.
I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
That's awesome.
So I can talk to my homie right here.
Yes.
And it's like, man, dude, I really appreciate you.
Of course.
I thought that was interesting. I just wanted to mention that, and I didn't consider what I do as being a nomad, but really, I go from job to job to job to job to job to job. Even though I see that I work for my business, I work for God because He gives me the business, He gives me the favor and blessing to be able to have these jobs, and also the mindset and the mentality to be able to run a business, to interface in a professional way, perceivably professional.
Yes,
I'm inventing words.
It's all good.
Way so that people can do business with me and feel confident in my ability to do that. Absolutely. Not only to do the work, but also to carry myself as a businessman. Anyway, I just never saw myself that way, and but it makes sense in the scope of the last few years of my life. I'd say 3 or 4 years. Well, I've been in the business 3 or 4 years, so it's interesting because my whole mentality has changed. Absolutely. To where before this business, I was working in factory, and I remember making the transition from being an employee to a boss, or not boss, but a visionary, someone who has to think 5 or 6 steps ahead. Yeah, entrepreneurial mindset, and it totally is, nomadic. And I can see where if someone's business, entrepreneurial, an entrepreneur, it gets kind of entrenched in the system of that he's established, that he loses his, he becomes, stagnant. He becomes fat, and he starts to not like his life because of the journey. The journey, he's arrived at his destination. And that's what I appreciate about being the nomad that I am. I'm also nomadic with the music. I don't stay. I don't look for a group to associate with per se, but I look to connect with individuals who also are looking for their journey, looking to build and don't question when it's been crushed, but start rebuilding again. And but anyway, very very encouraging there, and inspirational for me. But anyway, yeah, I was curious about your thoughts about the age of Aquarius, and what I'd like to receive a little education from you about that. That would be okay.
Well, I would first like to say, and I don't mean to sound conceited on this.
Oh, here it comes. Let me just go ahead and put that breastplate on. I'm about to get stabbed.
That I love it because that's my sun sign. Woo!
No, I'm kidding. Okay, he didn't shoot at me this time.
No.
Nice.
No, of course. But I mean, it's cool because I guess this would be a way of what I feel empowered, that the same way that you feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
That spiritual connection to our occupation. That
Right.
occupation, that we don't have to be in a sense where, like in the imperial sense, you have to separate your spirituality from your occupation. You have to separate state and religion because of the dissatisfaction of the citizenship, right?
Yeah.
Where, but that's only because, I mean, yeah, we're not in alignment with those who govern over us in this time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But there are times that where you see true alignment is where you see your civilization completely be aligned in a spiritual, occupational, social, physical. Everybody's on the same page about everything. You're equally yoked. You have a common foundation. And I wanted to continue encouraging you to know that a lot of people experienced that 4 years ago,
Wow.
3 or 4 years ago.
Interesting.
Not just in a sense where we talked about the 10 commandments being like to the third and fourth generation, but we like to see that 3 and 4 following up after each other, and 4 being that number. And I've been seeing a lot of my friends too talk about, I've been seeing 444 everywhere. And I'm like, a year ago you were saying you saw a lot of 333s, and I'm like, okay, that's, and I'm just looking at them like that, 'cause, like I'm like, okay, that's cool. But from my sense, or the perspective that I hold, is that 4 is the number for cycles. Our division of the days in 4s, even to the multiplication into 12, for 12 hours a day, 24 hours, if you're into math, knowing that the multiples of 4, fall into senses of time and cycles, 4 seasons,
Never thought of it that way.
yeah, just 400 years for the duration of imperial rule, like just things that we see over and over in 4, right? 4 generations, like Abraham got to see 4 generations after him. Adam got to see 4 generations after him. It's just kind of like a really cool thing to where, like, you see a cycle where, like, man, I really want to see my great grandchild before I pass, and y'all bury me somewhere where I want to be buried, and don't burn me into these ashes and throw me off into the sea.
Oh man.
Like, and no disrespect, that is also very beautiful and spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
But me personally, I want that for my parents and for myself, to where I can bury them where their roots are.
Wow.
That's for me.
Wow.
I'm talking personally for me.
Mm-hmm.
I do not want my parents or myself to be in ashes. I do want the physical being to go back from where it came.
Interesting.
I really want that, but that's a perspective thing that I'm entitled to, that no one else is obligated to.
Yeah. Okay.
But in that sense, looking at it from the 4 perspective, and the 3 being the anticipation number of being like, oh, we're almost there, so now we really got to keep our eyes open on this thing. It's like, when you hear the Bible talk about, be watchful, guard yourself, be watchful, guard yourself.
Wow.
Like, I need to go back into my lexicon and see how many times is this word mentioned in this book, because it's over like 100 times.
100 times.
And that's when that's emphasis is on there. Like,
my goodness.
But
Wow.
why am I saying all this? Is because in the sense of age of Aquarius,
Mm-hmm.
The age of individualism is a time for us to rediscover who we are. It's a time for us to, like we said, like tapping in. You know, a lot of us are paying attention to astronomical alignments now. Everybody was watching the solstice alignment.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful because whether you're a biblical person or not, you know, his civilizations for all time have been using the stars to understand the events.
Yeah.
You know, what that which is above is so below, you know, something that's carried on through all religions. You know, it's kind of weird that, you know, on a, you know, that statement as above is below is satanic, but also biblical.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're like, you see Baphomet hold the symbols in his hand of doing that. And then it's like, but also Christ, the image of Christ with the heart with the thorns around it, doing it. And I'm like,
same thing.
People.
Wow.
You know, but that's what people do with deism. They give their God, it's the concept of apotheosis.
Okay.
When you give your God all the goods, you're like, you're the origin of everything. You are the creator of everything. You are the this, and this. Like no other God is other than before you. You will have no other gods before me. That is across the board. Mm-hmm. Everybody did that with their gods. So even the gods themselves had a diaspora. Babylon and the Hebrews used to have multiple gods. They used to be polytheistic. But then Abraham broke that cycle and kind of took his El out of all the other L's and the Elas and the Allahs that were there. You know, the concept of all being like a bulls, like bullhorn, Aleph. Because from an agricultural perspective, the ox was the form of strength, authority, and power. And you as the lower ox were yoked to him and he would guide you. So you looking at your agricultural perspective was applying that to your spirituality. Because agriculture, as we know in the Bible, is the reflection of people's spirituality. You know, the seed, the parable of the seed.
Yeah,
or,
there's a lot.
Right?
Yes,
the pearl in the
New
ground.
Testament.
Yeah, it just goes on and on. It's agricultural because when it comes down to it, my friend, when a good sign for you to know when civilizations is being rebuilt is when people are starting to reconnect back to the earth and building from that point. We always come back to an agricultural sense. Even when the Americas was first being built, which is only, 300, 400 years ago, I mean, it was agricultural. Man. And then it gets industrial, and then it gets scientific, and then it's like, whoa, and then we hit the epiphany.
And then it goes back.
And then we are the ant again, and the power struggle, the power dynamic is shifted to another thing.
Wow.
It's like, good job, guys. All right, now it's yours. All right, what you gonna do? Boom. Cycles. It's the repetition of things. And for you, I would feel very fulfilled in what you have done and what you've attained, and the shift in your cycle has taken place into this time. That, you've already participated in this meditation, whether you think you did or not. You don't have to sit in the lotus pose in the corner with candles everywhere. No. You know what I'm saying? It's what your focal point is. And to go from an industrial mindset of being like an employee to your own self-sustainable being, which is what we all really desire, is to be self-sustainable. Realize you're going back to that parable of the foundation, like you said. You're not building on sand where people are still consistently clinging to something that they can clearly see is crumbling, like sand does. It's like you see the sand, but you're like, I must hold on to the sand as it goes through my fingers.
It goes through.
It's like, yes. But then, no, you're supposed to be on solid foundation, on the rock. Yeah. Something that is solid. Doesn't matter what you build on top of it afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Because if water, which is representative of chaos, hits it, it doesn't affect you. And you and your whole household, the refuge that you built for all your inhabitants, as for me and my house, and whom you serve, remains.
Wow. It's interesting how that just, it's, this conversation has ruined me because we're going to have to do this again. So, this is not a one-time thing. But anyway, I've really enjoyed this, man. I don't know. Do you have like any social media that you want people to check out, or anything you want to?
Wholesome Athletics is my brand name for my wellness coaching.
Okay.
Just one little statement I kind of want to, because I'm try to be as honest as possible.
Yeah.
I'm currently working on my certification, trying to use income from trade. So You know, hey man,
Yes.
you know, you setting that example. Look, I'm like, oh man, I gotta get like this dude. You know, like, and you know, cycling your trade, which is ultimately spiritual. We see that even in a biblical sense, that skilled craftsmen are always needed.
Mm-hmm.
The whole book of Numbers is about it. So that's if that helps with people and be like, how do we apply the Bible to our occupation? The whole book of Numbers is about skills craftsmanship, needing to build their nation. So, you know, you kind of need them. You always will need them.
Yeah. Always.
You always did need them. Even during the COVID at its worst, you needed them.
Yeah.
You know, but
Okay.
for that to facilitate your passion, and that's a whole nother thing. The work of your hands pouring into the work of your heart and back into the hand again. As the cycle, you know, that your heart for your hands and your hands for your heart. So,
that's cool.
Yeah, and just
and what was that again? So people can check you out.
Wholesome Athletics.
Wholesome Athletics.
So I'm trying to project this, and
is that .com or is it?
Oh no, it's just if you go on Instagram, all there is a underscore that divides the wholesome and the athletics.
Okay.
You'll find it that way. And then I have a Facebook page that could also link you directly to, you know, the Instagram page.
Okay.
That's the social media that I have. That's the only two social media I have is just for the sake of connectivity with my community. Okay. And I'm currently at Amethyst Incorporated. So that's who I'm doing business under. That's my brand name is functions as a I'm trying to remember what the commercial term for it is. Franchise.
Franchise, okay.
It works as a franchise. So it goes under businesses that facilitate the same kind of services and applies the fitness therapy to it.
Okay.
So all my experiences in my time under other teachers and kind of incorporates into it. So it's at Amethyst Incorporated, Holistic Health and Wellness Center. Excellent for your wellness needs.
Okay.
Definitely need to be checked out.
Sounds good, man. Well, it was a pleasure being here with you on Meet the Mimes. So until next time.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Until next time.
I really enjoyed it. All right, y'all. Thank you all for listening, and we will be back with another episode one of these days. Thank you for watching today's episode of Meet the Mimes. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I did. Give us a like if you'd like, and consider subscribing to the channel to keep you up to date on the most recent content. Well, that's all for now. Stay interesting.